So I'm sitting in the midst of all scholars. Is it Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav?
Ask me questions, I'll be in trouble.
How many of you have done or are doing Bhakti Shastri? All scholars. How many are doing Bhakti Vaibhav? How many are doing Bhakti Vaibhav? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Here? Here 4? Okay, 4 this side. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Gopinath, Radha Gopinath Radhe. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribol. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Sat His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Ki Jai Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Where is Shubha Krishna Prabhu? This, yeah? So, just tell me the verses again. 32, right? 32, 32.
At the end of the class, Pranita Mataji has done illustration for each of the shlokas and they are here.
Really? Wow, very nice. Wonderful.
They're very amateur.
Oh, very professional.
And we just like to stick them up on the wall after.
Okay, very nice. Excellent. Yeah. ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. So then how should we do at the end of every verse?
Yes, no, at the end of the class.
Okay.
Can we recap the session with this?
Okay, very good. So we will do that.
And put it this one. This one.
Sometimes?
Lights on.
13, 31, 32. Om Ajnanathimiramdhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm very happy that all of you are studying Bhagavad Gita very, very seriously and deeply. Bhakti Shastras have to be studied nicely because they help, they nourish our bhakti. Shastras are numerous. There are different kinds of Shastras for different kinds of mentalities. And even the same Shastras can be interpreted or understood differently according to one's mentality and philosophical orientation. So while in general we have the broad division as Jnana Kanda, Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda, the three sections of the Vedas. One section deals with, I think we can switch off the fan. One section deals with fruitive activities, performing sacrifices and other such religious activities for the purpose of some material benefit. This is called Sakama Karma, fruitive activity. It's ordinary mundane religiosity. It's not true religion. It's not the perfection of religion. It is materialistic religion. And that is a general conception of religion that people have generally across the board. Where whether it's Hinduism or Christianity or any other religion, people are seeking for some material benefits. The next is Jnana Kanda, where there is some conception now of salvation, that I want to get liberated. So all religions also have this element, that they want to get some salvation, want to get free from this material world. And then there is the element of Upasana worship, which technically means very broad things. This classification is understood differently in different contexts. But Srila Prabhupada explains it like this: Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. Upasana Kanda means those sections of the scriptures that include the Bhakti Shastras. So the Karma Kandas encourage karma, the Jnana Kandas encourage the path of Jnana, Jnana Yoga. And the Upasana Kandas encourage us in the path of Bhakti Yoga. So the path of devotional service is the path that is the simplest, the most sublime, and that leads us to the highest destination. And Srila Prabhupada explains, therefore, that the Shastras essentially have the conclusion of bhakti. That is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked the 6 Goswamis to study the Vedic scriptures and establish that the conclusion of all the Vedic scriptures is pure devotional service to Krishna. So that was one of the instructions given by Mahaprabhu to the Goswamis of Vrindavan. So they studied them, and eventually that was the essence, the crux of the message they got out of the scriptures. And as Krishna himself says, Vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedya. Adau antecha madhyecha harihi sarvatra giyate. So whether in the beginning or the middle or the end of the Vedic scriptures, Vede Ramane Chaiva Purane Bharate Tatha. Whether it's the Vedas, whether it's the Puranas, whether the Upanishads, the Ramayanas, in the beginning, the middle or the end, Harihi Sarvatra Giyate. These scriptures only speak about Hari or Krishna. Or at least the ultimate purpose is all ultimately Krishna consciousness. That is the idea. And also in case there is some misunderstanding, misinterpretation, then one has to take shelter of the Bhakti Shastras and see the other scriptures from the point of view of devotional service. So the Bhagavad Gita is a scripture for everybody. Everybody has their own take on the Bhagavad Gita. So those who are jnanis, those who are karmis, those who are bhaktas, and those who are of different philosophical orientations, everybody takes shelter of Bhagavad Gita. You've heard this proverb in English called different strokes for different folks. Yes? What's the meaning of that? Anyone knows the meaning of this proverb? Different strokes for different folks. That means different people have different mentalities, different likings. Somebody likes this, somebody likes that. So we slightly twist that to say different shloks for different folks. Yes? So we can also quote different verses that, and you will find in the Vedas any number of verses you want to substantiate anything you want. Whatever point of view you want to establish, you can do it from the Vedas. Because the Vedas are an unlimited treasure house of knowledge for about everything, and it's meant for people with all sorts of mentalities. It's not only meant for devotees, although ultimately everybody is meant to become a devotee. So people who have some materialistic bent of mind, okay, there's something there for you. You want salvation, there's something there for you. You want to use religion for the purpose of some material advancement, it's there. You want bhakti, it's there. So Bhagavad Gita is understood very differently by different people, and especially when we read Bhagavad Gita without the context of the Bhakti Shastras or without the perspective of bhakti, then there is confusion. Because different types of perspectives and angles of vision can be taken. So many different varieties of understandings emerge from the Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada used to say, then why do you call it Bhagavad Gita? Call it your own Gita. Bhagavad Gita means the song of God, Bhagavan. But you interpret it in so many different ways and give your own understanding and say, actually Krishna, when he says this, he means that. But Krishna doesn't mean that when he says this. When he says this, he means this. So different people interpret, put words into Krishna's mouth and say, when Krishna says that he is the source of everything, aham sarvasya prabhavo, mattaha sarvam pravartate, that everything originates from me, well, that means that the unborn, impersonal within me is the source of everything. But that is not what Krishna says. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the Bhagavad Gita can be divided into 3 sections, and the first 6 chapters, the middle 6 chapters, and the last 6 chapters. He also mentions that in the beginning there is Karma Yoga, the first section, the last section there is Jnana Yoga, and the middle section there is Bhakti Yoga. Although Bhakti Yoga can be found everywhere, Nevertheless, in terms of the primary emphasis, we have this classification that is given by Srila Prabhupada. So we're beginning with chapter 13 now, which is the beginning of the third section, where Jnana Yoga is going to be performed or is going to be described. And especially what Krishna is going to speak about is the interaction of the jiva with the material nature and the relationship to the super soul. So the interrelationship between the jiva, between the material nature and between Krishna as a super soul. And how the jiva can be freed from this entanglement. That is the topic of the third section of the Bhagavad Gita. Having described or having answered Arjuna's 6 questions till verse 26, then from the next verses onwards, Krishna basically, or from I think up to 31 probably, then Krishna summarizes the rest of the verses. The whole chapter he summarizes in the last few verses. What are the 6 things that Arjuna is asking Krishna? Yes. Start in the same order. Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Jnana, Jneyam. So what is the meaning of these 6? First is Prakriti. What's the meaning of Prakriti? Material nature. Purusha, the enjoyer. Who is the enjoyer? In this context, Paramatma, but the false enjoyer is the individual jiva. So the jiva is also referred to as Purusha because he's trying to be an enjoyer. Although constitutionally the jiva is not an enjoyer, but he tries to be an enjoyer. The real enjoyer is the super soul. So Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra refers to the material body, the field of activities for the soul. And then Kshetrajna, one who knows the Kshetra or the body. And who is the Kshetrajna? Jiva and the super soul both. So you have the Jiva Kshetrajna, you have the Paramatma Kshetrajna. You have 2 kinds of Kshetrajnas. Of the 2 kinds, the Jiva's knowledge of his own body is very limited. And he doesn't have knowledge of other bodies. Whereas the Paramatma Kshetrajna, the super soul seated in the heart, has perfect knowledge of our body, and he also has perfect knowledge of every other kshetra or body. Then there is Jnanam, which is the process of knowledge, and Jneyam, the object of knowledge. What is the object of knowledge? The Paramatma. So then Krishna is now going to, in these last few verses, going to 32, you said, right? He is going to summarize whatever he has said in the earlier part of this 13th chapter. Okay, so we'll start with 32. How do you go about it? You usually recite the verses and then do it? Okay. Anaditvan nirgunatvat Paramatmayam avyayah Sharirasthopi kaunteya Na karoti na lipyate. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. Anaditvat. Due to anadi. Anadi means without a beginning. Anadi. Adi is beginning, anadi is without beginning. Anaditvat means from that point of eternity, from eternity. Nirgunatvat, being transcendental to the three modes of material nature. Nirguna. Paramatmayam, beyond material nature. Atma, the spirit. Ayam, this soul. Those with a vision of eternity can understand the distinction between the soul and the body. They understand that the soul is transcendental and beyond the three modes of material nature. Sharirasthaha. Sharir means the body, sthaha means to be situated. Api means although. So although the spirit soul, the eternal transcendental spirit soul is situated within the body, sharirasthapi, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, na karoti na lipyate. Neither does the soul do anything, nor is it entangled in anything. Then who does? What performs the actions? The body, because the body is under the control of the three modes of material nature. So the body is acting, the body is receiving the reactions. Of course, the body cannot act without the presence of the soul. But the soul is not acting. The soul is not entangled. The soul is simply under illusion. The soul is simply covered over, imagining itself to be the doer. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, a living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body. But actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Thus he cannot be destroyed. By nature he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore the activities performed due to his contact with the material bodies do not entangle him. So the distinction between the soul and the body is very fundamental to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. And in fact, when you preach to people in this world generally, you will notice that this is one of the very strong points of Vedic philosophy. A very basic and simple point, that the soul is different from the body, and we have detailed understanding of what the soul is. But many other philosophies and religions do not have an understanding of what the soul is. Such a simple point. And the Bhagavad Gita starts with it and ends with it. In the second chapter, Krishna speaks about it. And in the last section also, Krishna speaks elaborately about this topic. So the identity of the self as being different from the body is very, very crucial, very important. Now, I'll ask you a question. I think I was asking this where was it? That was in Melbourne, to one Western group. Anyway, we get confused, so many places we go. Yes. We are all seeking happiness? Now answer confidently. I'm not tricking, no tricks here. Because now people are used to me, they know I always have a trick when I ask a question. So they're very cautious before answering. Are we all seeking happiness?
Yes.
Now, my question to you is, what's the question? No, the question is why? Why do you seek happiness? And therefore? But why am I why do I desire sense enjoyment if my soul is seeking, if my soul is by nature blissful? Fundamentally, we are the spirit soul. So because we are blissful by nature, Ananda, this feature of Ananda is there, so we are eternally blissful, but because I imagine myself to be this body, which I am not, I superimpose that feeling of happiness on this body and I try to get happiness on the platform of this body. So therefore I always seek happiness, and because I've misidentified myself with the body, so I seek that happiness in the frame of the body and the things connected to the body. Another thing, do we want to live? No trick. Answer? Why? Why? So, because we are eternal. Why do you want to live and forever? Because you are living forever. You are the soul. You are eternal, therefore you want to be eternal. But in this material body we can't be eternal. So our nature is there, so we desire. So the fundamental thing can't be changed. Are we curious by nature? We always want to know what's going on, what's happened. If there's some big noise that comes from the next room, immediately everyone's going to turn and look, right? What happened? Yes? They're very curious all the time. All living entities are curious. The birds, the animals, everyone is curious. We are seeking to know things. Okay, next question. What is the next question? Why? Why do you want to know? What's the answer? Because we are full of knowledge. So we are Satchit Ananda, we are eternal, we are full of knowledge, we are full of bliss. Therefore, when we forget that we are Satchit Ananda, that underlying tendency is very strong. So we want to be eternal, we want to be full of knowledge, we want to be full of happiness. So we seek that on the body. So this distinction is very important. So the living entity only appears to be born because of the birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. Srila Prabhupada used to give the example of the scorpion coming out from a pile of rice, grains. In the farms, sometimes in India you see huge piles of grains. And in the fields you have all sorts of insects and so on. Sometimes a scorpion may come out from that pile, and then we think the scorpion is born from the rice. But where is the scorpion born from? Another scorpion. Some egg was laid there, and that was there in the pile of rice. And so the scorpion was born there, and he emerged from the rice and came out, but it doesn't mean that the rice is the origin of the scorpion. Similarly, we have a material body. The material body comes from the mother or from the seed and so on. That doesn't mean that material nature is our origin. The material nature is like the pile of rice. So we are only emerging from that pile of rice, but our origin is something distinct. So from the first line of the purport, Prabhupada says that this misunderstanding happens, that we imagine ourselves to be born, but we are never actually born. The jiva is unborn. And even though he is situated in the material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Na karoti na lipyate. So doesn't perform actions, doesn't get entangled. So who gets entangled? The body, yes, the subtle body. The gross body gets destroyed anyway, right? At the time of death, the gross body is finished. Then who continues to the next body? The subtle body. So it's all stored in the mind. The mind is enjoying, the mind is suffering. The soul is blissful, but the soul has forgotten that I am blissful. You all know the story of Hanuman, no? The curse on Hanuman in childhood. Anyone knows? What was the childhood curse that Hanuman got? What did the sages curse him? Huh? Why? Why did they curse him like that? Hmm? He was very mischievous. And he was also very powerful. He was the son of the wind god. So he was extremely powerful even as a small baby. So he created havoc everywhere. In an innocent way, not in a malicious way. But he caused such a disturbance that the sages, they cursed him, may you forget your powers. And then they felt bad, we shouldn't curse him like that. He's Hanuman. They said, okay, you'll get your powers back when someone reminds you. You'll remember your powers when you are reminded of it by somebody. So then when Hanuman did not remember his powers, he became very quiet and subdued and humble. And when was he reminded? Huh? On the shore of the ocean, what was he doing? When he was on the Mandar Parvat, he was planning to fly or to jump across the ocean. And when Sugriva's army was sent there, Angad was there, Jambavan was there, and many others. And they were thinking, how can we jump across? And the Angad started asking everybody, how much can you jump? How much can you jump? And everybody was giving their own answers. And Jambavan was saying, in the olden days, when I was a young man, I could have jumped and encircled the earth, gone around the earth. But now I'm so old that I can barely just jump one time, but I can't come back again. So different monkeys, they gave their own answers. Hanuman was keeping quiet. Jambavan knew the secret. So he looked at Hanuman. Said, so Hanuman, you don't know your powers? So he reminded Hanuman of his powers. And the Hanuman thought, oh my God, yes, of course. I can do it. I'm very, very powerful. And then his body increased and increased and increased and became huge. And everybody looked on in great awe as they saw Hanuman's body. And then like a rocket taking off, he stood there waiting, revving up the engine. He flew across the sea. He landed at Lanka, and of course you know what he did there. So similarly, the soul is sleeping. Jiva jago, gora chanda bole, kato nidra jao maya pishachira kole. The soul is like now Hanuman, it has so much power, but now it's sleeping in the lap of the witch called Maya. So Mahaprabhu has come to wake us up. Wake up, sleeping soul. You are Satchidananda, but you are imagining yourself to be this material body and creating so many troubles for yourself. So wake up. So that's what the Krishna consciousness movement is, to wake up the soul, to make it realize that actually you are not meant to be here. The true self is never entangled. It is only the identification or the misidentification of the soul with the material body that causes the problems. Then text 33. Yatha sarvagatam saukshmyad akasham nopalipyate sarvatravasthito dehe tathatmanopalipyate. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahman vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Yatha, just as, sarvagatam. Sarvagatam means all-pervading, everywhere. Saukshmyat, very, very subtle, due to its being subtle. Akasham na upalipyate. So even though the sky is all-pervading, it doesn't mix with everything else. It remains the background for everything, but doesn't get contaminated. It doesn't mix with anything else. It is not adulterated. Similarly, sarvatra avasthito dehe. So similarly, the self does not mix. Tatha atma na upalipyate. So the soul doesn't mix with the body. The soul is completely distinct from the body. Even though it is within the body, but it is untouched by the body. Therefore, the body can come in and out of the soul can come in and out of the body. The soul is not obstructed by material obstructions like a wall or something like that. Matter cannot obstruct the progress of the soul. So the spirit soul, lying within the body in the region of the heart, is untouched by the body. Now we may say, somebody asked me a question one time. You say that the soul is in the body. Which part of the body is it? You tell me? Heart. Heart. So now then they ask me, what when there is a heart transplant? What happens? How would you answer?
I would say the soul recovers and then the other heart's put into the other heart.
Yes, actually the soul's position doesn't change. Because the heart is removed, it's not that the soul also is removed. It's not like a marble within a box. It's not, if you compare the heart to a box and the soul to a marble within the box, you move out the box and the marble goes out with it. Not like that. The soul is in the region of the heart, so it remains in that region with reference to the rest of the body. So the heart is taken out and the heart is replaced and the soul is still there. However, in the process of the heart being replaced, if the body somehow doesn't function, then the soul will be forced to leave the body, and that is death. So the soul, while being untouched, is somehow bounded by the body. As I was mentioning in a seminar on dust to dust, which we had here, that the soul leaves the body through different apertures. Do you remember that? How many apertures does the body have? How many gates? 9 plus 1. And what kind of people, how does a soul leave the body? Does it leave through the apertures? First of all, generally the soul leaves the body through the apertures. For sinful people, the soul leaves the lower apertures. For pious people, it leaves through the upper apertures. And for transcendentally situated people, it leaves through the Brahmarandhra, the small tiny hole at the top of the skull, which is generally blocked for ordinary people. But for yogis, that opens up. So the soul then leaves, and it is a super soul within who illuminates that path. And then the soul departs through that road. But the soul is still unconnected with the body. It remains. The qualities of the soul do not change. Just as the quality of the sky does not change because it is all pervading and everything is situated within the sky. So similarly, even though the soul is present within the body, the material nature of the body does not change the inherent qualities of the soul. The soul remains Satchidananda. The soul doesn't change because it is within the body. So purport. The air enters into water, mud, stool and whatever else is there. Still it does not mix with anything. Similarly, the living entity, even though situated in varieties of bodies, is aloof from them due to his subtle nature. Therefore, it is impossible to see with the material eyes how the living entity is in contact with the body and how he is out of it after the destruction of the body. No one in science can ascertain this. So this is the important point, that the soul is aloof from the body. Even though the soul is within the body, It is touching the body, so to speak, but it is not contaminated by the body. It remains aloof from the body. Both the soul and the body are fundamentally different. Therefore, the body cannot influence the soul or corrupt it. It is only when the soul identifies itself with the body because of the false ego, that is when the illusion starts. Alright, 34. Yatha prakashayatyekah kritsnam lokam imam ravihi kshetram kshetri tatha kritsnam prakashayati bharata. Oh, actually it shouldn't be son of Bharata, it should be scion of Bharata. S-C-I-O-N. Scion means descendant. Son is son, putra, S-O-N. But the word Bharata here, so this must be communicated to the BBT. Yeah? This is which edition? Printed where? Which? 1983. Yeah, this must be informed. Will somebody do this? Write a letter informing of this scion of Bharata and son of Bharata. It's a mistake here. Even the word for word is son, but actually it should be scion, S-C-I-O-N. Because most of these things were done by what is it called? They recorded it and then they transcribed it. So the devotees who were writing, they were transcribing, they may not understand the accent of Srila Prabhupada. So they understood something, the scion of Bharata. They said, oh, son of Bharata. Son and scion is different, right? Scion means a descendant. So Arjuna is a descendant of King Bharat. He is called Bharata. O scion of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. This is a continuation of the previous point. In the previous point, the nature of the soul being untouched by matter and all-pervading has been mentioned. And here the second illustration that is given is of the sun that illuminates the universe. Similarly, the soul is present in one place in the body and illuminates the body with consciousness. The consciousness is a symptom of the soul. I think, therefore I am. So this I am, that is consciousness. So what is life? Life is consciousness, and the consciousness comes from the soul. So therefore the soul is life. Today in modern medical knowledge, they do not have clear understanding of this. What is life? Any doctors here? So they talk of life in terms of chemicals and atoms and molecules. But life cannot be reduced to chemicals and molecules. As Prabhupada said one time, well, the dead body is still there, it has all the chemicals. It has all the atoms and molecules that were there. So let's say somebody dies. 1 minute earlier, all the chemicals were still there. But still, what is the difference between the body now and the body 1 minute ago? The difference is that the soul has left. It is not the chemicals or the atoms or molecules that constitute or are the source of life. So today, in most countries in the world, do you know how they define death in law? Any lawyers here? Who is a lawyer here? How do they define death in law? Anyone knows? That's medical definition.
You check the heartbeat.
What's that?
You check the heartbeat.
Heartbeat. No. They define death as the absence of life. Death is the absence of life. What is the next question? What is life? Absence of death. So they don't have an answer. What is life? They answer what is death by saying absence of life, but they don't define life. That means you don't understand death, because you don't understand life. So life is the soul. So they are right when they say death is the absence of life. They are correct. But they don't know what life is. So death is the absence of life because the soul is no longer present in the body. So when the soul leaves the body permanently, at that time we say there is death in the body. So when the soul is within the body, it illuminates the body with consciousness. And consciousness flows through the body by various channels. Prabhupada at one place also says it flows through the red blood corpuscles of the blood, RBC. You remember your school biology? Through the RBC in the blood, so they flow. Of course the nadis are there for the prana and so on, but generally the consciousness flows. Therefore we are able to perceive things. Even if somebody pricks you with the tip of your finger, you can feel it. The nerves, etc. are powered. Everything is powered by the consciousness. Otherwise, sensations stop. That is why when the soul starts withdrawing from the body, just prior to death, as we discussed in that seminar, the first thing that happens is the extremities of the body start losing their sensation. They start becoming cold because the life air start withdrawing from the extremities and start preparing to gather to go out through that aperture, whichever is the aperture. So the elements of the body start withdrawing, and as they withdraw, the sensations also cease, and gradually the consciousness is lost. And then the entire body loses sensation. There is no consciousness. You can cut up the body, you can burn the body, and the body won't protest. Of course, there are some instances, it came in the papers, it comes repeatedly once in a while. A man is declared dead and is put on the, about to get burned, cremated. He's placed. They're about to light the fire and he wakes up. That happens also because they haven't understood. They haven't been able to diagnose the death properly. So anyway, the important thing is that just as the sun is at one place, but it makes its presence known through its symptoms, which is sunlight. Similarly, the soul is at one place, but makes its presence felt through its symptom, which is consciousness. Do we have the sun in the room now? How many say yes? Is the sun present in the room? Okay. How many say sun is not present in the room? Now everyone's thinking. Trick question.
Simultaneously present and not present.
Simultaneously present and not present. Devotees learn all these things. You can stump anyone in your friends. But interestingly enough, that is the right answer. Because the sunlight is a symptom of the sun. There is no meaning to the sun without sunshine. So the sunshine is present, so the sun is present. But we don't mean that the sun globe is present. So the sun is present through its symptom, the sunshine. Similarly, the consciousness of the soul pervades everywhere and gives awareness, it gives sensation, it enables the body to function, it enables the mind and the intelligence to function. At the same time, the body remains aloof. So let's read the purport. There are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of this body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. Thus, consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. Very important point. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body. And as soon as the soul has passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be understood easily by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a product of the combination of matter. It is a symptom of the living entity. The consciousness of the living entity, although qualitatively one with the Supreme Consciousness, is not supreme. Because the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body. But the super soul, which is situated in all bodies as a friend of the individual soul, is conscious of all bodies. That is the difference between supreme consciousness and individual consciousness. So the one line that's stated by Prabhupada here, consciousness is a proof of the presence of the soul. So when sometimes ask you, your friends may ask you, what is the proof that the soul exists? What's your first answer? The presence of consciousness. Simple answer. What is the proof that the soul exists? The proof is presence of consciousness. Inasmuch as we are sitting here in this room, what is the proof that the sun exists? Sunlight exists. The presence of the sunshine indicates the existence of the sun. Sunshine is proof of the existence of the sun. So also consciousness is proof for the existence of the soul. Prabhupada used to say also that this sense of consciousness which gives us a sense of identity, I am, when we speak about ourselves, we do not say I body. No? I body is paining. Right? I head is paining. Right? What do we say? My head is paining, my body is paining. What does this mean? That the I is different from the head, different from the body. That the word my indicates possessive tense. That means I own. I own that head, I own that body. Just like you say, this is my book. So I am different from the book. So my body means I am different from the body. Common sense, isn't it? And even as we pass through our life, from childhood to youth to old age, to the point of death, our bodies have changed completely. There is no comparison between a newly born child and the same individual in old age. Practically no similarity. But still, in all stages throughout life, the living entity, that person still feels I am I. I was a child, I was a young boy, I was a young man, I was a middle-aged man, I was an old man, now I'm a very old man. That I, that sense of I-ness continues throughout. That doesn't change. That I is recognizing that the body has changed, but he doesn't feel that he has changed. I remain I. I am in the body, I was old, I was young, I was like this. So what is that constant I factor? That remains the same despite the changes of the body? That's the soul. So there are so many logical arguments Prabhupada used to give like this to help us understand the presence of the soul. And when people ask us, these are the kinds of arguments that we should give. So it's not just sentimental blind faith, there is a lot of logic behind this also. Last text. Yes.
When I say I'm thinking, what is thinking? Is my brain thinking? Is my soul thinking?
Just like when I say I am old, what does it mean? We also refer now to the body being old because we are identifying with the body. So I am thinking, meaning it's my mind and intelligence that are operating. But the mind and intelligence are operating because the soul is present within. If the soul leaves, then the mind intelligence go with the soul. But at the point of liberation, even that material mind and intelligence is left behind here. Mind and intelligence are also material things. Because they are material, they cannot act of their own accord. They are dependent on spirit. Matter is dependent on spirit, not vice versa. Yes. Yes.
So once we get liberated and we go to the full Dham, will we have the same type of natures or we have, because there's no mind and intelligence?
There is mind and intelligence. There are three types of senses, including mind, including intelligence. One are the gross senses, physical eyes, physical ears, physical nose, physical tongue, physical skin, gross senses. When there is death, the gross senses remain here because the body is here. But there are also subtle senses. That is why you have a ghost. The ghost can also see. How can the ghost see? Because the subtle body has its own senses. But that is also material. The subtle body has eyes, it has ears, sense of speech, sense of taste, it has all these things. But it needs a gross body through which it can try to enjoy the world. But the subtle senses are there in the subtle body. And eventually the third level of the senses is with the soul itself. The soul has its own spiritual body, and that spiritual body has its own senses, which are spiritual senses. So in the spiritual world, the living entities there are full spiritual bodies who have forms, who have eyes, ears, tongues, nose, everything. So when the soul goes back to Godhead, the gross material senses and the subtle material senses will be left behind. But the pure spiritual senses, the spiritual body will go to the spiritual world.
From our nature, can we guess what type of nature, spiritual nature we have?
From our nature, can we guess what type of spiritual body we will get?
Not body, but spiritual mood.
Spiritual mood. That will be revealed at the proper time when we are sufficiently advanced in spiritual life. You know, sometimes children, they have their aspirations for the future, know what they want to be, right? You ask him, what do you want to be today? He'll say, I want to be a pilot. Ask him after 1 week, he'll say, I want to be a policeman. Ask him after 1 year, he'll say, I want to be a doctor. Right? And eventually he'll end up being a teacher. But, so he has all these ideas. He doesn't quite know what he's talking about. Just something comes to his mind, he likes it, he says it. So he's not in a position to understand what he is and what he wants to be. He doesn't know. He's just saying it. So like that, so long as we are not spiritually very advanced, we may have some idea. Same thing, oh, I want to be a cowherd boy. I want to be a gopi in Vrindavan. But it's just like that boy saying, I want to be an astronaut. Yes? So we don't have to worry about that. When that student reaches the year 10, year 11, year 12, things start getting clear. Now, okay, I want to go into this line, then I want to do this further. So similarly, when we advance in our Krishna consciousness, then everything will come. But prior to that, there is no need for us to think. Right now we have only one, Prabhupada used to say, we have only one mode. That's called servant. Yes. Service will continue even then. It's not that after reaching the spiritual world we become master. There also we are servant. But now it's the mood in which we are serving there, that will become clear. Now we don't know the mood. So we're just plain servant. Whether servant in this mood or a servant in that mood, but we should be servant in good mood. Not in grudging mood. Right? Yes.
If you think that the body is the doer, the soul doesn't do anything, but the body is the doer. My question is, can the body do without?
The question is, can the body do anything without the mind and the intelligence? No. And can the mind and intelligence do without the three modes of nature? No. And can it do without the soul? No. So therefore, there are different levels of doers. At one level, the level of the doer is material nature. It's the body and so on. But beyond material nature, or rather, we may say individually we are the doer, but behind us there is material nature acting. But even behind material nature there is Krishna who is acting. So he is the ultimate doer.
So if the body cannot do without the mind and intelligence, why can't we say that the mind and intelligence are doers?
Because the question is, if the body cannot do without the mind and intelligence, then why don't we say that the mind and intelligence are the doers? Why do we say the body is the doer? Because even the mind and intelligence are ultimately not the doers. Ultimately it's material nature. And then behind material nature is Krishna. But because the body is used as the instrument to perform action, therefore it is considered the doer. And the mind and intelligence are also part of the body. They are just subtle, that's all. The body is of two parts, the gross part and the subtle part. So the gross body performs actions, the subtle body is the one that gives direction to the gross body.
Subtle body, the mind and intelligence, goes with the soul, so it is part of the soul.
No, not part of the soul. The subtle body is not part of the soul. The subtle body is still material, as the gross body is material. But the subtle body acts as a vehicle for transferring the soul from one body to another body. And the subtle body carries within it all the impressions and experiences of this life and all the previous lives within this world. So the subtle body is not part of the soul. It's completely aloof. The soul is completely aloof even from the subtle body. What to speak of the gross body? Just as when we're driving a car, we are aloof from the car. We have our own existence separate from the car. Although for practical purposes, we may, when you call the road, oh look at, oh who's going there? Oh that's the Mercedes going there. We say, but actually we mean the person driving the Mercedes. So we are aloof. From the mind, from the intelligence, from the gross body. Okay? Yes.
So, Maharaji just said subtle body is directed by the material nature
Hmm.
and material nature is directed by Krishna. So, through Krishna, the material nature is giving you thoughts and that is converting to action. Right? Then if that is the case, then why people are performing dirty things when Krishna is directing? So Krishna is supposed to be the purest and the perfect person.
Question is why people do wrong things if Krishna is directing the actions. Yeah, the answer is that Krishna is not intending or he's not directing, he's supervising it. He is simply overseeing the actions of the living entities, but the living entities are responsible for their own actions. He is simply facilitating. The responsibility is with the living entity because the living entity desires. And according to what the living entity deserves, then material nature, which is under the supervision of Krishna, facilitates. It is not that all desires are facilitated. It's also bounded by what we deserve. For example, I may desire to be a billionaire, but Krishna may not facilitate that desire if I don't deserve it by my karma. Right?
So, just last question. If the subtle body is generating few thoughts or desires which are again authorized by Krishna for getting into action, how do you change this nature of subtle body itself so that it synchronizes with what Krishna wants?
Perfect. How do you synchronize the thoughts of the subtle body with that what Krishna wants? When you have a magnet and you have iron filings and you place them above the iron filings, what happens? The iron filings align themselves along the north-south poles, isn't it? Will it always happen? Yes, even then. What if the iron filings are rusted? What happens? So then the iron filings will not align themselves. So what do you need to do to make those iron filings align themselves with the magnet? Remove the rust. Right? By the process of filing, you file it and remove the rust, or there may be other means of removing the rust. Rub it off, scrape it off, and then the pure metal will emerge, and then that gets aligned, attracted. So Cheto Darpana Marjanam, the rust is all there in the heart, lust, greed, anger, envy, pride, illusion, rusted. So the rust is there we have by the process of chanting, hearing, we scrape off the rust. Then the souls, the subtle body will start orienting his desires and thoughts towards Krishna. Right? Yes.
Maharaj, I just want to ask regarding the subtle body. When soul leaves, it gets the subtle body to transfer to another body. So I'm curious about that. What type of gender it will have? Do you have impression of the old body, or it's a silly question actually, or it's no gender? I'm just thinking of that. Subtle body. You're saying it's a subtle body. So
Gender is only with the gross body. Subtle body has no gender. But depending on the thoughts, if your thinking is such, you may end up with that gender. It's possible.
In the seminar, you said the people who suicide, they get the Bhskti body. Is it subtle body?
Subtle body.
So it's like there's no gender or anything.
Not necessarily, but there may be identification with that previous gender, because the body is still hankering after what was there in the previous body, that ghostly being. So the subtle body can aspire for anything. Depending on our consciousness in this life, we may either get the male gender or the female gender in the next life, depending on what we've thought about. Yes.
Consciousness, presence of consciousness is alive. Supposing if a person leaves an accident, it is unconscious, but still his life is there. How do you define?
Question is that if a person is unconscious after accident, then how can we say consciousness is still there? No, that definition of unconsciousness is different. There is a medical definition of unconsciousness, where they talk about external consciousness not being there. But there is still consciousness within, otherwise the person wouldn't be alive. The person is responding to stimuli. The heartbeat is still there. There are certain other parameters in the body that are there. So that is not the understanding we are talking about. That is medically unconscious, that's different. Right? Yes. Yes, okay, here. I better do the cameraman first, otherwise he will switch off the camera or something.
Whereas this is question from the internet. Jagannath Gopal Guru wants to know that, as you mentioned that one should take guidance of the Bhakti Shastra and see the scriptures from point of view of Bhakti. But I often get the question that you Bhakti yogis see everything from the point of Bhakti, but we can see it from different ways, and that makes sense to us. Different strokes for different folks. So how can we prove that the point of Bhakti is the best and topmost, and the other views are just full of confusion?
We are not saying that the other views are full of confusion. We are saying that the other views are meant for people with certain bent of mind, with certain mentalities. Those who want to approach it in one way will see it in that way. But bhakti is the culmination of it. Of all the processes of understanding the absolute truth, bhakti is the perfection. It is a culmination. Everything ultimately has to lead to the supreme personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Brahman, the Paramatma and Bhagavan, the three aspects of the absolute truth, are understood according to the kind of yogas you perform. So those who are in the path of Jnana Yoga will only understand Brahman. Those who practice Ashtanga Yoga will understand Brahman and Paramatma. But those who practice Bhakti Yoga successfully will understand Brahman, Paramatma as well as Bhagavan. So the understanding of the devotee is more complete. The understanding of the Ashtanga Yogi is not wrong but incomplete. Similarly with the Jnana Yogi, who thinks of the absolute truth only as the impersonal. So someone who thinks of the sun as sunshine is not wrong. But if he starts thinking that that's all there is to the sun, that is incomplete, because he doesn't understand there is a sun globe. So similarly, to think of the impersonal as the as absolute truth is not wrong. But to think that that is all there is to it in the absolute truth and that is the origin, that is wrong. That is incomplete. So Bhakti Yoga includes all other yogas, because that is the culmination of all processes. Okay? Yes. Have you switched on the camera again?
There's one Prabhu from the Mathur chatting says, when the entity actually desires something bad, like rape and everything, why does Krishna actually facilitate that sort of practice?
Why does Krishna facilitate the wrong acts? of some individuals. Because from time immemorial, according to the Upanishads, Krishna has been doing that. That is the purpose of the Super Soul. We have come here to this material world to live an illegitimate life. All the living entities in this world are here because they are rebellious of the order of Krishna. So they want to enjoy independently of Krishna. That's why they've come here. So Krishna, who has created laws here, he facilitates our desire because that's his function as a super soul in the heart. But at the same time, he also gives us an understanding that if you do this, this will be the consequence. If you do that, that will be the consequence. So we have to use our good spiritual intelligence to know what is right and what is not right. What are the consequences of this action? Therefore, I should or should not perform this. Okay? Yes.
Maharaj, in Melbourne, Keshav Prabhu had said that after being in time, we should start becoming curious to know what our Swarupa is. So, when do we start
So we should become curious about what our Swarupa is. Well, that's right. At the same time, we have to go beyond the three modes of material nature. Then we can. Then these things will come. Not before that. Otherwise it will be idle speculation. I want to be astronaut. No, I'll be teacher. I'll be like that. It's just like some child's play. Just some speculation. What will I be in the spiritual world? So better we just focus on Dasya Bhav. We are Guru Das. That is what Prabhupada said. We have only one Bhav right now. Just follow instructions in Krishna consciousness. Everything will be revealed in the proper way. There are processes where in the Raga Marg, in Raganuga Bhakti, people will give you some Siddha Pranali Diksha, they will reveal to you. That is a whole different topic that is fraught with so many dangers and misconceptions and so on, that we better not get into all that. So we follow the straight and easy path and just keep on going, and at the right time, if we are sincerely chanting the holy name, sincerely doing our devotional service, then everything will be revealed. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji has said that just chant the holy name nicely, your Swarupa will be revealed. Everything will come at the right time. Right? I haven't read the purport yet. Last year. Yes? Oh, we have still read 35. Sorry? Please say that again. 35, we have to still do 35, yes? Kshetra kshetrajnayorevam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. Those who see with the eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. Kshetra, kshetrajnayor. One to know the kshetra and the knower of the kshetra, evam antaram, and also to know the difference between the two. To know the difference between the knower of the body and the body itself. By the vision of knowledge, with the eyes of knowledge, jnana chakshusha, or Shastra Chakshu, divine eyes. So how does one understand the difference? Now here is the real answer. What is the proof that the soul exists? That is at one level. But now from this verse, how can you see that the soul exists? See through the eyes of knowledge. See through the eyes of the scripture. Jnana chakshusha. If you try to see through these eyes, no, then you cannot. You may have people approaching you sometimes when you try to preach. Can you show me God? Right? You had people like that? Can you show me God? So how would you reply? Yes.
Generally cross question, can you show me your intelligence?
Alright. Have you got the spiritual eyes? Well, if you go down that road, you get into the path of confrontation. Right? So, the simplest answer is really that we need different types of vision to see different things. To see a microscopic bacteria, you need a microscope. To see some stars in the heavens, you need a telescope. Right? And if your vision is defective, you need spectacles. So we need aids for vision. And even if you don't have spectacles, there are many things you can't see. You can see only in a narrow spectrum of wavelengths. You can't see beyond that. Owls can see in the dark, we can't. Dogs can hear sounds that we can't. Right? So our senses are very limited. They are material, they are imperfect, prone to making mistakes. Therefore, for seeing things which are beyond the senses, which are beyond matter, we cannot see them through these material eyes. So we understand through a higher vision, that's called Shastra Chakshu, the eyes of the scriptures. Now we can say, what is the power of our eyes to see? If today suddenly there was an eclipse and the sunlight was completely blacked out and you didn't switch on the light inside the room, you wouldn't even be able to see the hand in front of your eyes. When it's a pitch dark night, you cannot even see your hand in front of your eyes. So then Prabhupada said, what is the power of your eyes to see? Why are you so proud of your eyes that you want to see everything? As if your seeing with the eyes is the ultimate proof of everything. Because the eyes can deceive you in so many ways. So we have to see with the eyes of the scripture. Or the eyes of spiritual knowledge, jnana chakshusha. That's the answer. We don't see everything through the eyes. A lot of knowledge that we have is also based on inference without directly seeing. So similarly, here is knowledge that is based on a superior source. That is the scripture. And Brahma says in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we have to learn to see through our ears. Shruta ikshita. Shruta ikshita. We see through the ears. That's the Vedic process, not to see with the eyes. That will come automatically. But to see with the ears is more important, by hearing. By hearing spiritual knowledge, then we understand the presence of the soul. So therefore, kshetra kshetrajnayor evam antaram. The antara or distinction between the kshetra and the kshetrajna, kshetrajnaha, that comes to one who has jnana chakshu, the eyes of knowledge. Bhuta prakriti moksham cha, bhuta of the living entity, ye vidur yanti te param. So such a person who has the jnana chakshusha, who is jnana chakshusha, he can also understand the process of Prakriti Moksham, how to get liberated from the entanglement of the material world. Ye vidur yanti te param. And knowing this, then one can attain to the supreme destination. One can go to the spiritual world. Let's read Srila Prabhupada's purport. The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the super soul. One should recognize the process of liberation as described in verses 8 through 12. Then one can go on to the supreme destination. A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God, and thus gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, one can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes a stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master, by various instructions, teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations. One can understand that this body is matter. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. The body is the gross manifestation, and the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interaction of these features. But over and above this, there is a soul and there is also the super soul. The soul and the super soul are two. This material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who sees the constitution of the whole material manifestation as this combination of the soul and material elements can also see the situation of the Supreme Soul, becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of the spiritual master. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is talking about three things. What's the first thing? The body, the soul, super soul. So one should clearly understand the relationship, interrelationship between these three. Then one should also recognize how to get free from this bondage. And where does it all begin? It begins with getting the association of devotees. A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God and thus gradually become enlightened. Ado Shraddha Tataha Sadhu Sangha Tha Bhajana Kriya. So it starts with having little faith. That little faith makes us come to the association of devotees. There we start hearing about Krishna, about God, about the soul, and then we get engaged in devotional service, and then we move on in realization. The body is the gross manifestation, and the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. So the body is both gross as well as subtle. So with this, we end the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita entitled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. And now, yes Mataji, would you like to read, would you like to explain those charts that you have made? Yes. You can take the mic maybe.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes. Maharaj, I thought we'll be doing only 2 shlokas today, so